Designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts. Our current goal is to get to 100 written reviews on the podcast app to help new listeners find us. If you haven't subscribed and written a review yet, please do. We get closer to our goal every week. Your reviews continue to amaze us, and we learn from your feedback as well. So thank you for taking the time to share. This episode is supported by One Perfect Rose. Tonight, we'll read the second and final part to the classic tale, Beauty and the Beast, taken from the Blue Fairy book by Andrew Lang, published in 1889. When we left off, the merchant and father to Beauty was caught picking a rose from the beast's garden as a gift to Beauty. In punishment, the beast demanded that the father bring back one of his daughters. The catch was that she must choose to come willingly. Of course, the kind-hearted Beauty offers to go, despite the sacrifice entailed. Father and daughter arrive at the beast's castle and are about to meet him. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Deep breaths. The horse stopped at the foot of the flight of steps leading to the terrace, and when they had dismounted, her father led her to the little room he had been in before, where they found a splendid fire burning, and the table daintily spread with a delicious supper. The merchant knew that this was meant for them, and Beauty, who was rather less frightened now that she had passed through so many rooms and seen nothing of the beast, was quite willing to begin, for her long ride had made her very hungry. But they had hardly finished their meal when the noise of the beast's footsteps was heard approaching, and Beauty clung to her father in terror, which became all the greater when she saw how frightened he was. But when the beast really appeared, though she trembled at the sight of him, she made a great effort to hide her terror and saluted him respectfully. This evidently pleased the beast. After looking at her, he said, in a tone that might have struck terror into the boldest heart, though he did not seem to be angry, "Good evening, old man. Good evening, Beauty." The merchant was too terrified to reply, but Beauty answered sweetly, "Good evening, beast." "Have you come willingly?" asked the beast. "Will you be content to stay here when your father goes away?" Beauty answered bravely that she was quite prepared to stay. "I am pleased with you," said the beast. "As you have come on your own accord, you may stay. As for you, old man," he added, turning to the merchant, "at sunrise tomorrow you will take your departure. When the bell rings, get up quickly and eat your breakfast, and you will find the same horse waiting to take you home. But remember that you must never expect to see my palace again." Then, turning to Beauty, he said, "Take your father into the next room and help him to choose everything you think your brothers and sisters would like to have. You will find 2 traveling trunks there. Fill them as full as you can. It is only just that you should send them something very precious as a remembrance of yourself." Then he went away, after saying, "Goodbye, Beauty. Goodbye, old man." And though Beauty was beginning to think with great dismay of her father's departure, she was afraid to disobey the beast's orders, and they went into the next room, which had shelves and cupboards all around it. They were greatly surprised at the riches it contained. There were splendid dresses fit for a queen, with all the ornaments that were to be worn with them. And when Beauty opened the cupboards, she was quite dazzled by the gorgeous jewels that lay in heaps upon every shelf. After choosing a vast quantity, which she divided between her sisters, for she had made a heap of the wonderful dresses for each of them, she opened the last chest, which was full of gold. "I think, Father," she said, "that, as the gold will be more useful to you, we had better take out the other things again and fill the trunks with it." So they did this, but the more they put in, the more room there seemed to be, and at last they put back all the jewels and dresses they had taken out, and Beauty even added as many more of the jewels as she could carry at once. And then the trunks were not too full, but they were so heavy that an elephant could not have carried them. "The beast was mocking us," cried the merchant. "He must have pretended to give us all these things, knowing that I could not carry them away." "Let us wait and see," answered Beauty. "I cannot believe that he meant to deceive us. All we can do is to fasten them up and leave them ready." So they did this, and returned to the little room, where, to their astonishment, they found breakfast ready. The merchant ate his with a good appetite, as the beast's generosity made him believe that he might perhaps venture to come back soon and see Beauty. But she felt sure that her father was leaving her forever. So she was very sad when the bell rang sharply for the second time and warned them that the time had come for them to depart. They went down into the courtyard, where 2 horses were waiting, one loaded with the 2 trunks, the other for him to ride. They were pawing the ground in their impatience to start, and the merchant was forced to bid Beauty a hasty farewell, and as soon as he was mounted, he went off at such a pace that she had lost sight of him in an instant. Then Beauty began to cry, and wandered sadly back to her own room. But she soon found that she was very sleepy, and as she had nothing better to do, she lay down and instantly fell asleep. And then she dreamed that she was walking by a brook bordered with trees, and lamented her sad fate, when a young prince, handsomer than anyone she had ever seen, and with a voice that went straight to her heart, came and said to her, "Ah, Beauty, you are not so unfortunate as you suppose. Here you will be rewarded for all you have suffered elsewhere. Your every wish shall be gratified. Only try to find me out, no matter how I may be disguised, as I love you dearly, and in making me happy, you will find your own happiness. Be as true-hearted as you are beautiful, and we shall have nothing left to wish for." "What can I do, Prince, to make you happy?" said Beauty. "Only be grateful," he answered, "and do not trust too much to your eyes. And, above all, do not desert me until you have saved me from my cruel misery." After this, she thought she found herself in a room with a stately and beautiful lady who said to her, "Dear Beauty, try not to regret all you have left behind you, for you are destined to a better fate. Only do not let yourself be deceived by appearances." Beauty found her dreams so interesting that she was in no hurry to wake. But presently the clock roused her by calling her name softly 12 times, and then she got up and found her dressing table set out with everything she could possibly want. And when her toilet was finished, she found dinner was waiting in the room next to hers. But dinner does not take very long when you are all by yourself, and very soon she sat down cozily in the corner of a sofa and began to think about the charming prince she had seen in her dream. "He said I could make him happy," said Beauty to herself. "It seems then that this horrible beast keeps him a prisoner. How can I set him free? I wonder why they both told me not to trust to appearances. I don't understand it. After all, it was only a dream, so why should I trouble myself about it? I had better go and find something to do to amuse myself." So she got up and began to explore some of the many rooms of the palace. The first she entered was lined with mirrors, and Beauty saw herself reflected on every side, and thought she had never seen such a charming room. Then a bracelet which was hanging from a chandelier caught her eye, and on taking it down, she was greatly surprised to find that it held a portrait of her unknown admirer, just as she had seen him in her dream. With great delight, she slipped the bracelet on her arm and went on into a gallery of pictures, where she soon found a portrait of the same handsome prince, as large as life, and so well painted that as she studied it, it seemed to smile kindly at her. Tearing herself away from the portrait at last, she passed through into a room which contained every musical instrument under the sun, and she amused herself here for a long while in trying some of them, and singing until she was tired. The next room was a library, and she saw everything she had ever wanted to read, as well as everything she had read, and it seemed to her that a whole lifetime would not be enough to even read the names of the books, there were so many. By the time it was growing dusk, and wax candles in diamond and ruby candlesticks were beginning to light themselves in every room, Beauty found her supper served just at the time she preferred to have it, but she did not see anyone or hear a sound, and, though her father had warned her that she would be alone, she began to find it rather dull. But presently she heard the beast coming, and wondered, tremblingly, if he meant to eat her up now. However, as he did not seem at all ferocious, and only said gruffly, "Good evening, Beauty." She answered cheerfully and managed to conceal her terror. Then the beast asked her how she had been amusing herself, and she told him all the rooms she had seen. Then he asked if she thought she could be happy in his palace, and Beauty answered that everything was so beautiful that she would be very hard to please if she could not be happy. And after about an hour's talk, Beauty began to think that the beast was not so terrible as she had supposed at first. Then he got up to leave her and said in his gruff voice, "Do you love me, Beauty? Will you marry me?" "Oh, what shall I say?" cried Beauty, for she was afraid to make the beast angry by refusing. "Say yes or no, without fear," he replied. "Oh, no, beast," said Beauty hastily. "Since you will not, good night, Beauty," he said. And she answered, "Good night, beast," very glad to find that her refusal had not provoked him. And after he had gone, she was very soon in bed and asleep, and dreaming of her unknown prince. She thought he came and said to her, "Oh, Beauty, why are you so unkind to me? I fear I am fated to be unhappy for many a long day still." And then her dreams changed, but the charming prince figured in them all. And when morning came, her first thought was to look at the portrait and see if it was really like him, and she found that it certainly was. This morning she decided to amuse herself in the garden, for the sun shone and all the fountains were playing, but she was astonished to find that every place was familiar to her, and presently she came to the brook where the myrtle trees were growing, where she had first met the prince in her dream. And that made her think more than ever that he must be kept a prisoner by the beast. When she was tired, she went back to the palace and found a new room full of materials for every kind of work: ribbons to make into bows, and silks to work into flowers. Then there was an aviary full of rare birds, which were so tame that they flew to Beauty as soon as they saw her, and perched upon her shoulders and her head. "Pretty little creatures," she said, "how I wish that your cage was nearer to my room, that I might often hear you sing." So saying, she opened a door, and found, to her delight, that it led into her own room, though she had thought it was quite the other side of the palace. There were more birds in a room farther on, parrots and cockatoos that could talk, and they greeted Beauty by name. Indeed, she found them so entertaining that she took one or two back to her room, and they talked to her while she was at supper, after which the beast paid her his usual visit and asked her the same questions as before, and then, with a gruff good night, he took his departure. Beauty went to bed to dream of her mysterious prince. The days passed swiftly in different amusements, and after a while Beauty found out another strange thing in the palace, which often pleased her when she was tired of being alone. There was one room which she had not noticed particularly. It was empty, except that under each of the windows stood a very comfortable chair. And the first time she had looked out of the window, it had seemed to her that a black curtain prevented her from seeing anything outside. But the second time she went into the room, she sat down in one of the chairs, when instantly the curtain was rolled aside, and a most amusing pantomime was acted before her. There were dances, and colored lights, and music, and pretty dresses, and it was all so gay that Beauty was in ecstasies. After that, she tried the other 7 windows in turn, and there was some new and surprising entertainment to be seen from each of them, so that Beauty never could feel lonely any more. Every evening, after supper, the Beast came to see her, and always, before saying good night, asked her in his terrible voice, "Beauty, will you marry me?" And it seemed to Beauty, now she understood him better, that when she said, "No, Beast," he went away quite sad. But her happy dreams of the handsome young prince soon made her forget the poor Beast, and the only thing that at all disturbed her was to be constantly told to distrust appearances, to let her heart guide her and not her eyes, and many other equally perplexing things which, consider as she would, she could not understand. So everything went on for a long time, until at last, happy as she was, Beauty began to long for the sight of her father and her brothers and sisters. And one night, seeing her look very sad, the Beast asked her what was the matter. Beauty had quite ceased to be afraid of him. Now she knew that he was really gentle in spite of his ferocious looks and his dreadful voice. So she answered that she was longing to see her home once more. Upon hearing this, the Beast seemed sadly distressed and cried miserably, "Oh, Beauty, have you the heart to desert an unhappy beast like this? What more do you want me to do to make you happy? Is it because you hate me that you want to escape?" "No, dear Beast," answered Beauty softly, "I do not hate you, and I should be very sorry never to see you any more. But I long to see my father again. Only let me go for 2 months, and I promise to come back to you and stay for the rest of my life." The Beast, who had been sighing dolefully while she spoke, now replied, "I cannot refuse you anything you ask, even though it should cost me my life. Take the 4 boxes you will find in the next room to your own, and fill them with everything you wish to take with you. But remember your promise, and come back when the 2 months are over, or you may have cause to repent it. For if you do not come in good time, you will find your faithful Beast dead. You will not need any chariot to bring you back. Only say goodbye to all your brothers and sisters the night before you come away, and when you have gone to bed, turn this ring round upon your finger and say firmly, 'I wish to go back to my palace and see my Beast again.' Good night, Beauty. Fear nothing. Sleep peacefully. And before long, you shall see your father once more." As soon as Beauty was alone, she hastened to fill the boxes with all the rare and precious things she saw about her, and only when she was tired of heaping things into them did they seem to be full. Then she went to bed and could hardly sleep for joy. And when at last she did begin to dream of her beloved prince, she was grieved to see him stretched upon a grassy bank, sad and weary, and hardly like himself. "What is the matter?" she cried. He looked at her reproachfully and said, "How can you ask me, cruel one? Are you not leaving me to my death, perhaps?" "Oh, don't be so sorrowful," cried Beauty. "I'm only going to assure my father that I'm happy and safe. I have promised the Beast faithfully that I'll come back, and he would die of grief if I did not keep my word." "What would that matter to you?" said the prince. "Surely you would not care." "Indeed, I should be ungrateful if I did not care for such a kind beast," cried Beauty indignantly. "I would die to save him from pain. I assure you it is not his fault that he is so ugly." Just then, a strange sound woke her. Someone was speaking not very far away, and opening her eyes, she found herself in a room she had never seen before, which was certainly not nearly so splendid as those she was used to in the beast's palace. Where could she be? She got up and dressed hastily, and then saw that the boxes she had packed the night before were all in the room. While she was wondering by what magic the beast had transported them and herself to this strange place, she suddenly heard her father's voice, and rushed out and greeted him joyfully. Her brothers and sisters were all astonished at her appearance, as they had never expected to see her again, and there was no end to the questions they asked her. She had also much to hear about what had happened to them while she was away, and of her father's journey home. But when they heard that she had only come back to be with them for a short time, and then must go back to the beast's palace forever, they lamented loudly. Then Beauty asked her father what he thought could be the meaning of her strange dreams, and why the prince constantly begged her not to trust appearances. After much consideration, he answered, "You tell me yourself that the beast, frightful as he is, loves you dearly, and deserves your love and gratitude for his gentleness and kindness. I think the prince must mean you to understand that you ought to reward him by doing as he wishes you to, in spite of his ugliness." Beauty could not help seeing that this seemed very probable. Still, when she thought of her dear prince, who was so handsome, she did not feel at all inclined to marry the beast. At any rate, for 2 months she need not decide, but could enjoy herself with her sisters. But though they were rich now, and lived in town again, and had plenty of acquaintances, Beauty found that nothing amused her very much, and she often thought of the palace, where she was so happy, especially as at home she never once dreamed of her dear prince, and she felt quite sad without him. Then her sisters seemed to have got quite used to being without her, and even found her rather in the way. So she would not have been sorry when the 2 months were over, but for her father and brothers, who begged her to stay, and seemed so grieved at the thought of her departure that she had not the courage to say goodbye to them. Every day, when she got up, she meant to say it at night, and when night came, she put it off again, until at last she had a dismal dream which helped her to make up her mind. She thought she saw, wandering in a lonely path in the palace gardens, when she heard groans which seemed to come from some bushes hiding the entrance of a cave, and running quickly to see what could be the matter, she found the beast stretched out upon his side, apparently dying. He reproached her faintly with being the cause of his distress, and at the same moment a stately lady appeared and said, very gravely, "Ah, Beauty, you are only just in time to save his life. See what happens when people do not keep their promises. If you had delayed 1 more day, you would have found him dead." Beauty was so terrified by this dream that the next morning she announced her intention of going back at once, and that very night she said goodbye to her father and all her brothers and sisters, and as soon as she was in bed, she turned her ring round upon her finger and said firmly, "I wish to go back to my palace and see my beast again," and as she had been told to do. Then she fell asleep instantly, and only woke up to hear the clock saying, "Beauty, Beauty," 12 times in its musical voice, which told her at once that she was really at the palace once more. Everything was just as before, and her birds were so glad to see her. But Beauty thought she had never known such a long day, for she was so anxious to see the beast again that she felt as if supper time would never come. But when it did come, and no beast appeared, she was really frightened. So, after listening and waiting for a long time, she ran down into the garden to search for him. Up and down the paths and avenues ran poor Beauty, calling him in vain, for no one answered, and not a trace of him could she find, until at last, quite tired, she stopped for a minute's rest and saw that she was standing opposite the shady path she had seen in her dream. She rushed down it, and sure enough, there was the cave, and in it lay the beast, asleep, as Beauty thought. Quite glad to have found him, she ran up and stroked his head, but to her horror, he did not move or open his eyes. "Oh, he's dead, and it's all my fault," said Beauty, crying bitterly. But then, looking at him again, she fancied he still breathed, and, hastily fetching some water from the nearest fountain, she sprinkled it all over his face, and to her great delight, he began to revive. "Oh, beast, how you frightened me," she cried. "I never knew how much I loved you until just now, when I feared it was too late to save your life." "Can you really love such an ugly creature as I am?" said the beast faintly. "Oh, Beauty, you only came just in time. I was dying because I thought you had forgotten your promise. But go back now and rest. I shall see you again by and by." Beauty, who had half expected that he would be angry with her, was reassured by his gentle voice, and went back to the palace where supper was awaiting her, and afterward the beast came in as usual and talked about the time she had spent with her father, asking if she had enjoyed herself, and if that they had all been very glad to see her. Beauty answered politely and quite enjoyed telling him all that had happened to her. And when at last the time came for him to go, he asked, as he had so often asked before, "Beauty, "Will you marry me?" She answered softly, "Yes, dear beast." As she spoke, a blaze of light sprang up before the windows of the palace. Fireworks crackled and guns banged, and across the avenue of orange trees, in letters all made of fireflies, was written, "Long live the prince and his bride." Turning to ask the beast what it could all mean, Beauty found that he had disappeared, and in his place stood her long-loved prince. At the same moment, the wheels of a chariot were heard upon the terrace, and two ladies entered the room. One of them, recognized by Beauty as the stately lady she had seen in her dreams. The other was also so grand and queenly that Beauty hardly knew which to greet first. But the one she already knew, she said to her companion, "Well, Queen, this is Beauty, who has had the courage to rescue your son from the terrible enchantment. They love one another, and only your consent to their marriage is wanting to make them perfectly happy." "I consent with all my heart," cried the Queen. "How can I ever thank you enough, charming girl, for having restored my son to his natural form?" And then she tenderly embraced Beauty and the prince, who had meanwhile been greeting the fairy and receiving her congratulations. "Now," said the fairy to Beauty, "I suppose you would like me to send for all your brothers and sisters to dance at your wedding." And so she did, and the marriage was celebrated the very next day with the utmost splendor, and Beauty and the prince lived happily